Hello everybody, welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you've never been here before. My name is Lauren. I am a self-taught artist. I work mostly with oil paints, and sometimes I post videos rambling about philosophy, and sometimes I post videos rambling about art. Today, I actually have a plan of what I would like to talk about, which is why we are in the studio today. I posted a video a while back about what a successful portrait painting does, what it represents, if it represents anything, and what sort of connection it has to the person in the painting. You can find that video here. It's one of my favorites I've done so far. As with most of these topics, by the end of the video, my mind was not made up about this matter, but I've been trying to figure out why I feel compelled to paint some people and not others. And usually there will be this moment where I'm interacting with someone where suddenly I just feel compelled to paint them. It's not like a purely face-based thing. It's more so I get a glimpse of that person through my experiences and interactions with them, and that makes me want to paint them. I think that's very interesting, and I had questioned, okay, is me painting this person that I feel compelled to paint an attempt to crystallize or solidify the impression I got of that person at that moment? And if so, is that a negative thing, like in the sense of crystallization of a person? You know, kind of having this fantasy idea of a person in your head that kind of took the surface level interaction you had with a person or the surface level appearance of that person and just kind of let your mind run wild with it and create this fantasy version of this person that actually doesn't exist at all. And although I do believe what I'm doing in portraiture is a kind of crystallization, I don't think it's negative in that way. I don't think it's building an illusion or a fantasy version of the person that I'm painting. But it is a sort of crystallization in the sense that I am taking my impression I have of a person, which of course is only going to scratch the surface of how that person is as a whole, and trying to capture what I saw in that person that really resonated with me and connected with me. And of course, the finished painting is not going to be like they're looking in a mirror. But I don't think it's bad because I think it's okay to capture a moment of the ongoing movement of a person's life. Because it's just one image, it kind of does imply that it's just one snapshot of the whole. So that's what I discussed in that video, and again, I can link it somewhere. I wanted to film a follow-up video on this because my thoughts have developed a little bit since then with regard to the topic of portrait painting, and these discoveries arose in the process of me painting a portrait for a friend of mine for her birthday. I would show you, but she might be watching this and she can't see it because birthday portraits have to be a surprise. Everybody knows that. So in the process of working on that, I did make two discoveries. The first, I followed some advice I found from someone else on YouTube. I can link it if I find it. But basically his point was that it's better to color match from a printed out image than from like a tablet or a computer because of the way that the light bounces off the surface of the paper is similar to how light would bounce off the surface of the subject matter that you're painting, rather than with a tablet or laptop or something where the light is shining from inside and then you're gonna get glare sometimes depending on the lighting. And I've had this experience before where, well, I'll be painting in the day and color matching from my laptop, and then at night I'll be like, wait a minute, this looks like a completely different color. That was one thing that I applied to this portrait in particular that I definitely think I will continue to do, is working from a printed out image. And so that was one thing. But I was really intentional about color matching and trying to get the colors and the values just right off the bat on the first layer of paint, which I usually don't do. And I think I shouldn't do that because the more intentional I am about the first layer of paint that I set down on the canvas, the more hesitant I am in subsequent layers of paint to diverge from what I've already put on the canvas so far. The creeping anxiety of, oh no, I'm gonna ruin it, just increases the more precise I am with the first layer. It prevents me from taking risks in the subsequent layers of paint, which actually I think in the long run makes the painting worse. So I noticed that with this current portrait, I set down that first layer of paint really intentionally, and I found myself struggling to get back into the flow of working on it again. I also noticed that I was going for a much more realistic style. I wasn't really trying to implement any of my own sort of stylistic quirks, whereas like in self-portraits, I've been going for much more textured, loose brush strokes, a lot more squiggly line patterns, and I want to implement that in this portrait. I want want it to speak to my own style so far as an artist. It's important to stay true to your artistic style, not put yourself into a box and say, oh, I do squiggly lines and thick brushstrokes with portraits, so I should only do that. I'm not saying that, but like for me, how I feel compelled to paint, that's how I must paint. I know this is different for artists who work on commissions. If someone has commissioned a portrait from you and they want it in a more realistic style and that's what you're good at, I think it's a little bit more complicated in that situation. Ideally, you would have people buying or commissioning paintings from you that were in your artistic style, but I'm sure, I don't know, that's probably why I don't get commissioned paintings, because I'm very like stubborn about just painting what I feel compelled to paint, and honestly I find it pretty difficult to paint anything other than what I'm compelled to paint. But I was nervous to implement those sort of stylistic choices. And I think part of the reason is because there was sort of this subconscious expectation, I guess, I had that most people who aren't artists see realism as like the most impressive and respectable artistic style, like the type of stuff people look at and think, oh, I could never do anything like that. Like, that's impressive. And it is impressive. But for starters, the person I am painting is an artist, not a visual artist, but an artist nonetheless. I want the gift to speak to who I am as an artist and also capture like some of like how I feel about the person. I don't really know a good way to say it. Like, I don't know, I feel like painting someone is a really unique gift in that way, because it's not just, I mean, if you were to paint someone and it's just a one-to-one representation of the person, like it looks like they're looking in the mirror, that's impressive, that's a cool gift too. But I think it's even more special if you kind of get a glimpse into how the painter sees you. That brings me to the second point, the more complex topic that I wanted to discuss. I guess a couple days ago, I noticed in the process of painting this, and also in the process of painting this door here, that it is really difficult for me to paint people that I just love or people that I just care about. Like, my connection to that person is very simple. It's very hard for me to paint those people. I think this goes against the possibility that when I am painting portraits of people, it's a negative sort of crystallization of that person, because oftentimes when my relationship with someone is very simple and surface level, I struggle to paint those people even more than I struggle to paint people that I love and that are very close to me. But it becomes really easy, not easy, but it becomes very compelling to paint people that I love and care about, plus some extra thing, something more complex added in, like some sort of like mixed feelings or like tension. I know that sounds really like, what? Mysterious, but I'm kind of struggling to explain it. Basically, as soon as there is a new layer of emotion or a new layer of experience or memories I have with a person, as soon as that new layer is there, I feel ready to paint that person. And I think this is why it's easy for me to paint self-portraits, because one, I don't have the expectation of giving it to someone else and saying, here's how I see you. This is the impression I have of you. Two, I know that I'm constantly changing and that each self-portrait I paint is just a moment of my own ongoing life movement. Each self-portrait is certainly not going to capture the entirety of who I am, because it's like, I can't even do that. I don't even know that, you know? So yeah, like as soon as, you know, I'll have some sort of impression of someone, something they do or say or however I feel about that person compels me to paint them. Usually it's something like, I really love seeing people speak passionately about whatever they're passionate about, and not in the sense of like, oh, I'm so passionate about blah blah blah, like where it's sort of implied in a way that's very obvious, like to see somebody's eyes light up talking about something that means a lot to them. I often feel compelled to paint people in those moments, or like something unique that I can't really anyways, I'm more compelled to paint people once the dynamic has shifted a little bit, because there's just an added layer of complexity that I can challenge myself to capture in a painting. And also, I like to see, like with this piece, this one here, big door, it was really interesting for me to see, like, I started that painting with a particular impression of the person in the door frame. I noticed as the painting process went on, because my dynamic with that person had shifted, and because the shifting dynamic I had with that person coupled with my growing frustration at the limitations of the painting surface being so textured, I noticed that with each subsequent layer of paint, I was painting a lot more chaotically and impatiently, but like in a reckless way, where at first I was painting very carefully. I wanted the likeness of the person, despite the fact that it was behind frosted glass, to resemble that person, perhaps because I wanted them to be able to see themselves in the piece, and perhaps because I wanted to impress them in that way. But as the painting process continued, it's almost as if my impression I have of the person when I'm starting the painting, it changes as I'm painting, just because the more you interact with the person, your dynamic with them is going to shift and change over time. It's almost like a sort of meditation where like you're painting the person, but then as you're painting it, the further along you get in the process, it's almost as if it isn't that person anymore. I noticed this with the self-portraits as well, because I have a lot of my paintings hung up in my apartment. One day I kind of looked around and I thought, it might seem kind of weird to people that I have so many paintings of myself. Like, I hope people don't think I'm like a narcissist or something, or that I love to look at my face all the time, because it's really not that. Like, when I look at them, I don't really think about them being me until I really think about it in moments like that, where I'm like, oh, this might seem kind of weird if somebody came over and they're seeing all these paintings of my face. But for one thing, a lot of those are just studies where it's like, oh, I need someone to paint, and I'm always with me, so I always have someone to paint. But they don't really feel like me. They remind me of the time that I painted them in, which is sort of like the moment of the movement, you know. But it's kind of this weird juxtaposition, because on the one hand, I want the portrait to capture the complexities of that dynamic that I have with the person, and what is captured there is something that is dynamic and ever-changing and always transforming, but it's captured in, you know, on a canvas in a single image. To capture that dynamic movement and that, like, capturing that person in that moment in a way that is genuine and not fantastical or illusory, not, you know, an illusion or a crystallization of that person in a negative way, you know, capturing the moment for that person in a way that honors and reflects their lifelong movement, while at the same time, due to the fact that my dynamic with that person is itself dynamic, it is ever changing over time with each subsequent layer of paint. Like, each layer can kind of start to resemble that ever-changing dynamic and that ever-changing impression that I have of the person. I hope that makes sense. Hello, it's me later this night. I just had one more thing to say that I think will articulate it better. To me, a successful portrait is not so much about capturing somebody's likeness, about representing how they actually look. It is much more so about capturing the ever-changing dynamic between two people. What a successful portrait captures to me is the dynamic nature of intersubjectivity. How you see another person is never static unless you don't know that person, and all you have to go on is how they look and sort of your surface level impressions of the person. But when you really start to get to know a person, that intersubjective dynamic is ever changing. Maybe this wasn't worth plugging in my microphone again to say, but I think that's what I'm really aiming for in portraiture. I think that's when I really feel like I've succeeded in a portrait painting, is when I feel that I've captured the dynamic nature of intersubjectivity itself, of how I view that person, how they view me, how we interact. It's not so much about capturing their likeness. I'm starting to get a little lightheaded because all the windows are closed in here, and I've got a lot of cadmiums on the palette at the moment. So I'm gonna wrap it up because I'm starting to get a little lightheaded. So it is a crystallization, but it's a crystallization that honors the movement, both of the person I'm painting and also my own ongoing movement. So as I'm painting, my changing dynamic with that person is worked into each additional layer of paint. And it's a sort of moment in which the crystallized image or impression I once had of that person is shattered and reassembled into an imperfect yet more intricate and dynamic and complex image, which to me is better. I would rather have a more complicated image than just a simple, perfect one, you know? I mean, no painting is perfect, but perfect in the sense of resembling that person only on the surface. What's the point? They probably have a mirror at home, you know? So the initial painting, the initial reference photo, for example, it is based on my initial impression of the person, and it is based on how that person was in a particular moment in time, because like if I'm working off of a reference photo, or even if I'm painting from life, that's how they are in that moment. But that's kind of what makes paintings so different than photographs, because the camera capturing an image is not going to infuse any of its own feelings into the final image. Versus like when I'm painting someone, I'm not just painting their likeness, I'm not just representing their appearance, I'm infusing the image with my own feelings towards that person, whether they are positive, negative, complicated, simple, whatever. The painted image is always subjective in a way that a camera just isn't. Granted, every image is a way of seeing, to reference John Berger, but paintings are unique from photographs in that way, because maybe a photographed image can capture definitely the way of seeing of the photographer at the time, how they look at the world and the patterns that they notice that maybe other people wouldn't have noticed, and them photographing it can kind of share that way of seeing with the world. But even that way of seeing is just captured in a second. A painting, on the other hand, that takes time, whether it's like a day or like months or years. A painting has the potential to capture many more layers of the artist's way of seeing, and specifically the artist's way of seeing that person, than a photograph would. And I think that is kind of what makes painting somebody like as a gift so special, and also so vulnerable, which is one of the reasons why it's special. But yeah. Of course, a painting is based on my impression of the person, but it is a moment of the movement, both for the person I'm painting and also for myself. So that it's almost a sort of dialogue. It's almost a sort of conversation or exchange that a photograph isn't really capable of doing. But again, I'm no photographer. I'm not very good at it. If you've seen me struggle to photograph my paintings on Instagram, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm not a photographer, but... So I'm not dogging on photographers out there. I'm just saying that the image captured by photographs versus paintings, it's different, which isn't controversial. As I catch different moments, as I accumulate different moments, the portrait of that person in my head also changes. Indeed, must change if the portrait is to do that person justice at all. Yeah, so that's what I've been thinking about at the moment. I'm very curious to hear y'all's thoughts on this. I'm really dehydrated and getting lightheaded from these cadmium yellows and cadmium reds right next to my nose. So I'm gonna go drink some water and get some fresh air. And I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope it was interesting. Yeah, eventually y'all will see the portrait that I'm talking about on my Instagram probably, once it's finished. If you want to stay up to date on what I'm painting and my works in progress, you can follow me on Instagram at Lauren Bush Paints. If you're interested in purchasing some of my art or art prints, you can do that at laurenbushpaints.com. I hope everybody is having a lovely day, and thank you for watching. And yeah. Bye.